was not a perfect parent, but just remember that I loved them, and that I would always love them.
Welcome to the Legacy Project. My name is Jim Copple, president of the Servant Forge Foundation. We're an organization committed to leadership development with a specific focus on service. This podcast and its related activities are about sharing the legacy we have inherited and discussing the legacy we still want to create. Legacy is more than cars, houses, boats, and material possessions that we want to leave to the next generation. Rather, legacy is about core values and beliefs that we inherited from a previous generation. They are the values that shaped us and defined us. Legacy is also about the values we develop or create that can be passed on or shared with the next generation. We will interview people from various backgrounds and walks of life. Some are famous, some, well, maybe not so famous, and others are simply our neighbors, our friends, people who live ordinary lives doing extraordinary things. Become part of this project by being intentional about legacy, more than just memories, but principles that have guided our lives and shaped our decisions. What is the legacy you choose to create? That's what we want to discover. Today in our podcast, we're interviewing Ron Copple. Yes, we have the same last name. We're brothers. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to interview him for this podcast. He has had a tremendous influence in the world in which he lives, a successful businessman in the state of Washington, and also past president of the Washington State Youth Soccer Association. He has been an influence on thousands of kids and their lives in the world of soccer in Washington State. He's currently living a retired life here in Arizona, and I thought it'd be a good idea to get his perspective on the legacy that he has and the legacy that he's created and the influences that have shaped him and the legacy that he seeks to leave behind. Again, we all have a legacy, and we all have an opportunity to create a legacy. Ron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to be here.
Glad you agreed to do this. It's strange interviewing my brother in this process. Obviously we grew up in the same household and the same family, but we didn't always have the same influences. Who are some of the most influential people in your past that helped shape the legacy you've inherited or created?
I think that probably the most significant was when I was looking for work and with a wife and 2 children and trying to find a way to support my family. Came into the insurance industry and had been offered a life insurance policy when my son was born in '67. And then another opportunity came up in '69 when my daughter was born. And it turned out that policy was cheaper and more benefits. And I felt like I got really ripped off the first time around. And they had coincidentally had offered me a job, told me to come in and get an interview to be an insurance agent. The rest is history, but 48 years later. But at that point, it was a rough road to get into because it was a commission sales. My own dad told me that I wouldn't last 6 months. And the manager that interviewed me said that you wouldn't last 6 months. But I like a challenge, and life is a challenge. And so what I chose to do is prove them that I am worthy of being a professional insurance agent. And just as an example, side note, that this manager offered me a fountain pen. They told me to go out in the hallway, develop a sales presentation to bring into him and sell him on the idea of buying these fountain pens for his clients. I go out in the hallway and I look at the fountain pen, I open it up, and it turns out to be a little miniature stapler, not a fountain pen. And I thought, well, this is kind of, looks like a trap. I developed a sales presentation for the stapler, and went in and basically told Clay happened to be his name. I said, Clay, I know that you really wanted fountain pens, but I have something revolutionary that's much better for your clients and for your customers, and it is a pocket stapler. And went into my sales presentation, and he said that he didn't have a choice, but he had to buy the stapler because he gave me the wrong pen.
So it wasn't planned.
Apparently not.
No.
I think that was in his own defense.
Yeah.
And from that point on, again, I was a commission salesman. I had a manager took me out to teach me how to do this job, and great guy, did a good job of teaching me, but we didn't sell much. And I thought, well, this isn't going to work, and let me go out and do it myself, and then see what I can do. And during that course, every year that I made the company's top honor club, which was Chairman's Council, I would write a note to Clay and just on my letterhead and say, just wanted to let you know I'm still here. And it's now 15 years later, now 20 years later. So that's how the insurance industry really influenced me. I think my dad and my general manager, I think were the ones that really led me to be independent and to be a self-starter.
So in the ebbs and flows of a business, particularly commission type business, what is it that carried you through on those low periods where you wondered, well, this is a struggling month or a struggling year or whatever?
It's funny you should ask that question, because there'd be times that I would go out on interviews and with clients or prospects and maybe not sell anything or not sell it right away. I was not a hard closer. I was a empathetic closer, one that I need I need to make sure you're understanding what you're buying, and not everybody is into that mode when you first present them. So it's kind of a funny story, I think, because when I get down and I can't sell anything, I would go to a car dealer and I would negotiate the purchase of a new car. And I'm a hard closer when it comes to buying cars. So we would sit there, and in one particular car, it was a $25 difference between what I wanted and what the salesman wanted. And I might be there an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I go, okay, fine. And I get up and walk away. I had no intentions of buying a car. What I was doing was practicing my closing and my sales techniques with somebody that I knew wasn't going to be buying from me, but I needed to find a way to motivate myself again. Now, I want to go lease a car or I want to go buy a car, so I better go sell something. So I've got the money now to go do that.
Yeah, it's a great strategy. So when you're in terms of a business, and did you come out of the experience, and now you're retired from the insurance business, of certain principles that you've lived by or operate by?
One of the principles I think I chose to do early on in my industry, I started in insurance in 1970, and one of them, like I mentioned earlier, the life insurance policy, I feel I got really ripped off because I didn't quite understand it, and I don't think the agent did a good job of presenting it. But he was a captive agent for that company, so as time goes by, I learned that was his downfall. I always wanted to make sure my clients were treated the way I want to be treated. And if I want to be respected and I wanted to be their insurance agent, I had to treat them as, I want you to be my client. Mm-hmm. I want you to be part of my family. And I spent 48 years. During that period of time, I still actually had clients that I started with in 1970 that chose to stay with me with their investments or with their insurance, or and passed on to their relatives. They're survivors.
So relationships are important?
Relationships are very important.
So keeping clients with you and building that relationship was an important piece.
Absolutely is.
Yeah.
It was a critical mass, because it's always, when you're in commission sales or any kind of sales, you're constantly looking for your next sale. But if you develop your book of business, your clients, instead of policy owners, and that's what I always refer to them as clients, because a policy owner is somebody that buys a policy, and then the next agent comes along and maybe sells them a different policy or another policy that you missed out on. If they're your client, they're going to call you and say, do you carry this? Do you have this type of coverage? And that's the kind of clients I wanted to have, ones that are going to call me first and say, Ron, can you do this for us? And they did. And that's why I was able to last as long as I did. I was not not a high pressure salesman. Probably could have made a whole lot more money, but if I'd have been a higher pressure salesman. But the reality is I wanted my clients to like me as I like them, because I want them to stick around.
Mm-hmm. So that narrative early on, when your father, our father, said, "Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind?" etc. I mean, I got to admit, I remember hearing that narrative and thinking, "Really? He's going to be a salesman?" And just that was not something that was in front of us as a potential career, given your history. But what is it that made you punch through that narrative?
Well, one of the things that is tongue-in-cheek, but we always refer to our dad as a master of a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
He tried a whole lot of different things. He was a salesman.
Yeah, that's true.
Dad was a salesman.
Yeah.
He could sell in just about anything you put in front of him. And not that was probably a leading factor, because when this all came about, Dad was working at Boeing as a jitney driver. Mm-hmm. And Dad was as happy as I've ever seen him. So he wasn't having to sell anything. He was having to be in a position that he was very comfortable with. But sales I had a short stint of about a month selling Christmas cards in July. And this guy was going to pay me $75 a week to go sell Christmas cards. I thought, well, this has got to be the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard, selling Christmas cards in July. People are not thinking about Christmas. But in fact, they were. Mm-hmm. I didn't sell a lot of them, but because I wasn't sold.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
It was like I was not convinced that this is the time to do that. But
so on that point, that would almost suggest, in order to be a good salesman, you have to believe in what it is you're selling.
Exactly. And keeping in mind that I was selling Christmas cards, so I had a tangible to touch and feel, and a book to show. When you're selling insurance, you're selling a belief. Mm-hmm. You're selling a piece of paper that is potentially their future. So you have to believe in what you're selling, whether it's disability insurance, it's life insurance, auto, homeowners. You want to make sure that the people buy what they need to have, and you have to believe in it. Absolutely. And I don't know that really pushed me over the level, because I worked at Boeing for a short window and felt that that was not where I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. I was a young man and felt that there was more to life than punching a time clock. Mm-hmm. But that was for me. Yeah. And I figured if I don't try this, I'll never know whether I can do this. And,
another part of your legacy or history is you were in the military, you were in the Navy. Mm-hmm. What made you decide to join the Navy?
Ironically, my dad was in the Navy. Mm-hmm. And we were raised in Missouri, so you're not near the ocean.
Right.
Seemed like a good idea to travel.
That's why people ask me quite often, you sail and you're from Missouri?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Dad was in the Navy, and I had the opportunity to enlist, and that's what I did versus being drafted. But Navy seemed to be the place I wanted to go, so I could do some travel and follow on Dad's footsteps. Mm-hmm. Even though Dad didn't share greatly with his naval history and his activities, the fact is that we knew he was in the Navy, mm-hmm. and that's all that mattered to me. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be in the Army. I didn't want to be in the Marines, and I'm not real crazy about heights, so I didn't want to be in the Air Force.
So what did you learn from your naval experience?
Military, in general, helps you grow up quick. Mm-hmm. There's none of this, I'm going to put you on restriction because you don't do what I tell you to do. They just flat hammer you down if you do wrong. But you learn to follow disciplinary actions. You learn to follow instructions. We as kids always fight against instructions from our parents. We believe they don't have a brain in their head until we become about 26. The Navy taught me that you can work with other people, and you need to work with other people, not against them, but join as a team. And that's what we in boot camp. I'll never forget this. The day I die, that we had to tie strings around our T-shirt tails and hang them on the clothesline, and they had to be tied in a square knot. You couldn't do a granny. You couldn't do anything else. It had to be in a square knot, and then you had to wrap it around the clothesline, and you had to measure it between T-shirts. You could only have an inch between each tail. And the same with your shorts, your skivvies. But you look out in the yard at the laundry. We didn't have washers and dryers. You had to hand wash your clothes, and then you had to go hang them on the dryer lines outside. And it was a breathtaking sight.
T-shirts and skivvies.
Yes, exactly. You got to see who really cleaned their underwear.
Yeah. That's great. But they were all
Uniform.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely uniform. You had to measure in between to make sure that everything was, and you got 50 guys out there doing the same thing. So it's not, you can't go out just by yourself and do it. You're doing it as a team. You march every place as a team. You learn teamwork. I think was probably the single biggest item you learn from the military. And camaraderie.
So what did you do on board ship?
I was an electrician, and my job, one of the jobs we all hated, is we stood watch on the electrical board and the generators in the engine room. So it's noisy, it's hot, it's miserable. We're on a pre-World War II ship, so it's not air conditioned.
Yeah.
You have tubes blowing air in there. My job is to check and make sure that there's nothing going wrong with the switchboard. It's got all the power and all the lights. If something should occur, then I'm supposed to dismantle, basically turn off the power boards, turn on the remote generators to bypass the switchboard. Well, that happened one night when I was on a 4 to 8 watch. And I went do my inspections, and I had water running on the back of the switchboard. And eventually, it was going to short out one of the generator controls. So I have to go tell the officer on deck in the engine room that I got water on the generator, and then all hell breaks loose because everybody's running around trying to figure out where the water's coming from. Unfortunately, right above the generators is the kitchen. The mess decks. So somebody had overflowed a sink upstairs. And so that's where we were getting the water running down. But this was part of my training, and I just did the job. I didn't think anything more about it other than saving the electrical controls. Well, about a week or two later, I got a commendation at muster in the morning for saving the ship. I go, really?
Well done. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. The second duty I was the boat electrician, because we had landing craft, and all the landing craft have batteries and starters, and just like a regular motor. My job was to make sure that the batteries stayed fresh and were charged, the starters and everything worked. Whenever we put all the boats in the water, I would have to go out on a rescue boat and sit and wait in case somebody broke down. Actually, I enjoyed this because it gave me the opportunity to run around the ship and check the batteries on all the landing craft. They taught me how to land and pilot the landing craft, but the acid batteries eat up my clothes like crazy, and they don't give you enough allowance to buy new clothes. So I had 2 pairs of dungarees. One pair for muster in the morning, another pair to wear with holes in them when I go work on the boats.
So the ship was a troop carrier, or
It was a troop transport, yeah.
and so with landing craft.
Yes.
Now you transported troops to Vietnam, correct?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
How many trips did you make?
We made 4 trips, and 2 of those trips we dropped them in the boats and took them into the beach. That's how I wound up standing on land. Because my job again was to make sure the boats operated. We had one that died on the beach and couldn't get it started, so I had to get off and go find out and fix it. It was interesting too, because a boat I sat on is like the captain's crew, or not a captain's crew, it's the captain's boat, but it's actually the commander's boat. It's all wood, beautiful piece of equipment. And we would set and keep constant backing up, so you get all that nice smell of diesel fumes going into the cabin. But you learned a lot to adapt. We cooked our meals on the engine.
Oh wow!
Put your sea rations on the engine and cook them up. They weren't always the best, but when you're out there for 9 hours, you better have something to eat. Yeah.
So when you were on board ship and you were transporting troops to Vietnam, did you have much interaction with the troops?
We did,
Yeah.
or I did, because some of the Marines we had, we were transporting, wrote nasty things on the deck, and we knew that we didn't do it. But you don't write "screw the Navy" on the side of our home.
Yeah.
And I, they didn't have great accommodations aboard this ship. They were stacked 8 high on their bunks down in the hold, and they were all allowed to come up on deck and get fresh air. They weren't stuck down there, but and they had their mess decks time before or after ours. But anyway, they wrote nasty things on the wall. I had went to get some cleaning stuff because I was on mess deck duty that particular day, and this sergeant from the Marines came up and goes, "Oh no, we will take care of this." And I don't know if he found the guys that did it, but I know the wall got cleaned and painted.
Wow.
And it was done that day. It was, so he must have known who did it, because he obviously had some people that don't like the Navy.
Yeah.
What can I tell you?
Yeah. Other core values. I mean, I've noticed watching you on Facebook and in other contexts, you're a strong supporter of veterans affairs and people who have served the country. Have you? I mean, is it your experience in the Navy that is taking you to that place? Is that an accurate assessment?
I think that's an accurate assessment, yes. I think that when I entered boot camp, the family was gone. I mean, they were there, but they were gone. They were not my support group. I had to develop a support group when I got aboard ship. Well, actually, when I reported from Great Lakes, Illinois, which was boot camp, to San Diego to report aboard ship, I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. I was 17 years old, and I'm in San Diego, and I go to the ship, and they tell me that they're shut down for the weekend. This was Friday, and that for me to report back on Monday.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting in San Diego figuring, what the heck am I supposed to do? There's 3 of us, and what we're supposed to be doing. I had a kid from New York, and a kid from Detroit, Michigan, and myself. And the 3 of us said, this is probably our very first trip out without family guiding us. And the 3 of us were kind of lost.
Yeah.
But we managed to teamwork. We managed to gather up and find a place to stay the weekend in San Diego before we reported aboard our ship on Monday morning. So I've always, again, because military supports each other. It's a different life, and I think everybody should have to spend 2 years in the military or something of that magnitude, because it helps you grow up, it helps you develop relationships with other people. You can be an introvert, but you can still develop relationships with people that might be for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And so that's why I support the VFW. I support different veteran groups. I keep an eye on the ones that are questionable, but anybody that's out there to support the veterans has got my back, and I got theirs.
Yeah. So another big part of your journey has been youth soccer. How did you get into that?
Well, in 1973, we were moving into a new house. We had a couple of pretty good years selling insurance, so we bought a bigger house. It's one of those things you do when you make a few extra dollars. As we're unloading the truck in their driveway, the neighbor comes over and says, I have a son, looks like you have a son about the age I need, and I have a son his age. We're building a soccer team. Well, we're from Missouri. We didn't play soccer. We didn't know anything about soccer. So my son, Ronnie Jr., played soccer for this guy. And it was exciting. It was watching these kids running up and down the field, watching them being trained to what to do with the soccer ball. I did baseball, I did football, I did a lot of those, but never saw soccer. So as a parent, I was excited to go watch. Well, then my daughter decided to play at 5, and she played on this, what we call an in-house team. They don't really keep score. They are learning to play as a team and things of that nature. And because there's not supposed to be any scores kept. Well, at the end of the game, their coach made the girls run a lap around the field. And she made it pretty vocal that they had to run the lap because they lost the game. So not one to want to overprotect my child, but I go down and ask the coach, I says, so why are they running a lap? And she said, because they lost the game. And I said, well, aren't you part of the team? And she said, yes, I am. I said, well, then you get your butt out there and run a lap with them. And she ran a lap and ran to the parking lot and never came back. So guess who wound up coaching the team?
Wow, I didn't realize that connection.
Yeah. So I had to go buy a book to find out what the rules are. And the next thing I know, that particular team stayed together. Not all of them, but 15 of the 17 girls that I started with, I had when they were U19. So I had them for that length of time. They actually wanted to form a maternity league. After some of them got married and they wanted, I just, no, we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have life relationships with those girls today, young ladies and mothers and grandmothers. We use soccer as a reason to get together to go camping and to have friends and have Christmas parties. And soccer was something that was new to my life, and it was exciting, frustrating because scores are so low, but that's part of the American dream is you got to run scores up. Well, soccer, if it's a 1-0 game, it was a great game. And I don't know, it was just something that the game itself reached out and grabbed my heart, and I stayed with it. After the kids were done playing, then we kind of stepped back and said, okay, we're administrators now because I can't really keep up with the kids. I was still reffing soccer, but which was fun because you're out there with the kids and exercise, but they need administrators. And my wife was a past president for 6 years. Tough time. The last 2 years are the toughest. And I said, no, I don't want any part of that. Well, then the administration after her was dysfunctional. And we went to the meeting and people came out and said, Copple, we need you to run for president. I go, the only way I'm going to do that because you guys are fighting so much internally that you have to come under the basis that there's a new sheriff in town. We're going to do it and do it right. We're going to work as a team. And I got elected president twice and chose not to run the third time.
Is that a year?
It's a 2 year.
2 year.
2 year event, yeah. because you just about get your projects going, and the 2 years is up. So a 4-year stint was just about right, but I don't know that we got anybody to run if it was a 4-year stint to start with.
So we're talking with Ron Copple. Yes, he's my older brother. And this is the Legacy Project is a program of Servant Forge, which focuses on developing leadership. So Ron, you and Pam both were involved in soccer.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Between the two of us, we probably have 78 years of volunteer work in soccer.
Wow.
Yeah.
So once you got into the administration, what motivated you to stay? I mean, was it just fun, or was it because you really cared about the kids? Was it the sport?
I think it was once I become an administrator, because prior to being president, I was rules chairman for the state, and I was a rules chairman for disciplinary action. On doing that on a regional level and on a national level. It was try to make sure that the program was fair to all children. We have kids at 5 and we have kids at 18, and we have kids that just want to kick the ball around and ask you at the end of a game who won. And we have other kids that are in there for a college degree or college scholarship. So we have all levels of competition, and you want to make sure, you want to make sure that your program is going to benefit all of them. And when I was president, I had 135,000 kids that I was responsible for. And I made my communications available as limited as they were back then. We don't have the internet quite like we back then, like we have today, but I had email, and you need to talk to me, you can talk to me. I'm your state president. You call me or you send me an email, and let's see if we can't fix your problem. Making sure those kids had a place to play, and an affordable place to play. The game is, in my opinion, has gotten to the stage where it's cost prohibitive for kids to play today. But
really, in soccer?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because what's happening is you're getting a lot of professional players that can no longer play, and now they want to coach and they want to get paid. And some of them are charging like $1,500, $2,000 per player to come out, and he'll coach them.
So that's an interesting point. And let's talk about this for a minute, because of all the certain projects we've worked in at Servant Forge, I have grandkids who play hockey, and that is just probably the most expensive sport because of the equipment and all of that's involved. And so you don't see very many minority children involved in hockey. But in soccer, at least historically, I've at least perceived that that's a sport that's very accessible to Latinos, to Hispanics, to African Americans, etc. But you're saying it's becoming more and more prohibitive.
In the competitive level, yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
As time goes by, you're getting inflated by all these professional ball players, and a lot of them are from England, and they stay here in the United States, and they can't play any longer. They got their knees are shot or whatever the case may be, and so they want to stay in the game. They have a lot of value to bring to the game to a certain degree, but they want to get paid handsomely, and so on the competitive level, it's getting where it's costing a kid $2,000, $2,500 to play.
Is soccer experiencing the same kind of thing, especially in light of child abuse cases, etc., that was in the gymnastics world, for example? Is soccer, and when you were president, what did you have, 100,000 kids or so?
135.
135,000 kids playing. Did you run into those kinds of situations, or there was abuse, or
Absolutely.
People keep it secret?
They do keep it a secret to a certain degree. Now, my wife, when she was president, she developed a risk management program and developed it for our state to the point where it was so successful that it went nationally. So all the kids have an opportunity to have the coaches and administrators, team parents, volunteers, all have to have a background check. What she had arranged was in Washington for the Washington State Patrol, which had huge background check program
And capacity. Yeah.
and the capacity to do that, and she arranged for that to be free
Yeah.
for us. So we developed this risk management program, and then also had an appeal process. So if you were suspended because of actions that was detrimental to the program, you had a right of appeal, but doesn't mean you're going to get back in the program. Being in the program was not a right, it was a privilege. And you have to, if you abuse that privilege, and we did have abuses, yes. And it's sad that it goes in a kids program, but it does.
Yeah. So how many years were you involved in youth soccer?
I started, wow, I think it was a total of about 37 years.
Really?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah.
A lot of time.
A lot of time, all volunteer.
All volunteer. Major commitment of time. Well, that's significant. That's huge. And would you consider that part of the legacy you've inherited and the legacy you've left?
I believe it is. I think it's huge. Many of those administrators that I worked with, coaches that I worked with, kids that were playing under my administration remember me and fondly. You know, obviously there's always somebody out there that was not happy of a red card I gave them as a referee, but all in all, in my retirement years, I have a lot of soccer friends that we communicate daily. And you wouldn't have that relationship if you hadn't built a legacy with them. And I think the legacy that we did build, and I do want to add a little bit, when I first took over as president, the board of directors and the current president at that time, couldn't get anything done. They were fighting amongst themselves so bad that I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do to mend this fence. But we were not going to be functional if we didn't get the board of directors. And there was 21 people. So it's a significant size to get somebody, get these people to start working together. So I had a board retreat. And I made up, and I don't even know where I got this idea, but I made up these note cards, 3x5 note cards, red, blue, and white. And red is anger. You put down what you're really mad about. You don't have to put down who you're mad at if you don't want to, but you have to put down what you're mad about. And then in the blue, you put down what you really like about the program, why you're staying involved in it. And then the white was for any questions you have or any indications of where you'd like to see us go. So we went through this process, a 2-day event, and every so often I would stop the meeting, pull up 4 or 5 cards, and read them. Because you don't know who they're from, unless they decided to put their name on them, which very few did. Right. And we would discuss those cards. I'd pull up a red, a blue, and a white, and each event. And when we were finished at the end of 2 days, that board was already working together on planning their own little mini retreat of getting the directors who represent the kids, of having a meeting and saying, we need to have Ron come to the meeting and we need to talk about where we want to go with this.
That's fantastic. I'm going to steal that.
Do it.
I'm a facilitator, and that's a great idea.
And I don't know what made me do it that way.
Yeah.
But it worked. And when at the end of the day, end of the 2 days, I was exhausted. But I felt like we accomplished a great deal. Yeah. And we did. We still fought. We still argued over things. That's going to happen. We got 21, actually 22, counting myself. You're going to have issues.
Yeah.
But we spent 4 years together of making our program. We actually went from 108,000 kids to 135,000 kids in that window. We also hosted the girls' national championships twice. So we accomplished a great deal, along with having one of our preliminary World Cup games in our baseball stadium. All that accomplished in that window. So because they were working together, teamwork, back to the military.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So let me ask you: we all have symbols in our life or possessions in our life that remind us of who we are or where we came from. I actually have a little black box that Dad gave me that was an old first aid kit, I think from World War II. And I have things in that box that remind me of where I've come from, what I've done. And do you have something like that?
Wow, that's amazing. Dad was a Ames Dairy milkman.
Yeah.
He had a steel cash box that he carried around. That's how he got his milk and got his cheese paid for. I have that box.
Huh.
And I use it for my miniature tools because it's not very big. It's probably a foot long and probably 5 inches wide. But it's a solid steel box with a metal tray in it for your cash. And I still have that box, and I would never ever part with that box.
Yeah.
That box reminds me of our first official home that I remember when Dad was a dairy, Ames Dairy guy. And I remember in our Lee Summit home, he wouldn't allow me to touch it because it was in the toolbox or in his garage where all of his tools were at. We weren't allowed to. We could go look at the tools. We couldn't touch them. Yeah, you know how that works.
Yeah.
The two boys.
Exactly.
So that is the one single item probably for my life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because when we moved from Washington, D.C. to Salt Lake City, Utah, I was not involved in the move. I was traveling and we moved relatively fast. But when I got to the house, the first thing I said to Colleen was, "Where's the black box?" It's in the bottom drawer beside your bed where it always is. So that's a symbol.
That's my symbol, of my life when I was a kid. And I have, what I have is a belt clip that I had a church key on, my dog tags on, and a can opener that I carried on when I was aboard ship, because you need, first off, you need a church key. No matter where you're at on the ship, somebody needs something open. And then you have your can opener that the military issues you. You can't wear those things out, apparently, because I still have mine.
Oh, wow.
And that's sitting there with my metal box, my dad's box.
Yeah.
Little things I think like that. There's no reason for me to keep it, but there's all kinds of reasons for me to have it.
So, a question we ask everybody in this interview process is, at the end of the day, what do you want your children to remember about you?
Wow. I would like my children to believe I did the best I possibly could for them. I was not a perfect dad by any stretch, but I would like them to know I love them from the bottom of my heart unconditionally, and that whatever we did experience, because we had a divorce in the family and it didn't settle well, but life that goes on, and we did find that. And but again, I was not a perfect parent, but just remember that I loved them, and that I would always love them.
What kind of legacy would you like your children to have? I mean, in terms of what they do with their lives.
I have, my son is doing a great job, I think, on his legacy. He's a professional horse trainer. He's never going to be rich. That's not an industry that you make a lot of money at. You do make a tremendous amount of friends and relationships. And I think in his end of his career, his legacy is going to be that he did what his clients wanted done. And he is also referred to as a horse whisperer because he does have a magic touch with the horses. Daughter, that's a tough one.
There's always a tough one.
She's going to have to learn what it's like to be a grandmother. She has 2 grandkids now. She's finding out that what it was like for us. And I hope that they have a better relationship with their kids than maybe we did during a certain window. But my other kids, they've all got, I got one that's a teacher that's in biology, and she's making great strides in humanity and educating kids in honor classes and bringing the kind of people we would like to have run our country.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm seeing in some of my kids. I want them to be happy more than anything.
So you've got 4.
We actually have 5.
5. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we have 5.
Right.
We have 2 boys and 3 girls. We inherited a boy,
Yeah.
but we've had, and we brought them all together, and it's not a secret anymore. It wasn't until when we found out I had a son out of wedlock, and that was reality. He's a good kid. He was in the military, which gives him a big star.
Yeah.
He was actually an MP for a while, and he's down to earth. He's got the handyman skills of working with wood like I do. His dad, we refer to me as his father and the other guy as his dad, because I don't want to replace his dad.
Yeah.
That he was always trying to figure out how he became so adept at woodwork. Well, that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I didn't know you could inherit that stuff, but maybe you can.
Well, for the sake of audience and clarity and also transparency, you actually discovered the son through, was it Ancestry?
Ancestry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Good point.
and you took steps in action to find out who he was and came together.
Yeah. It was a questionable event, but yes, Ancestry brought it together, and we said, we have to do this for his sake as well as my own. And if he doesn't want to be part of the family, then I would understand that.
Yeah.
No, that was an interesting part of my life.
Yeah, a legacy you didn't know you had.
A legacy that we did not know we had. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
But that's also being forged going forward. Ron, thanks for doing this.
I appreciate it. Thanks for asking me to.
Yeah, this is great. We've been talking with Ron Copple, who is my older brother, and I'm here in Arizona with him, and discussing legacy, our past, telling stories together about our childhood and things we remembered. And I thought he has an important voice for the audience that listens to this podcast. Thanks a lot.
Good. Thank you.
To find out more information about this conversation and other Legacy podcast episodes, go to servantforge.org. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and consider leaving us a review. We want to hear from you. We want to get your ideas and your opinions. I have a new book that corresponds with the Legacy Project titled The Seeker, Bring Me the Horizon. You can find a copy of it on Amazon or your preferred book distributor. The book corresponds closely with these podcasts. The podcast episode was produced by Matt Erickson and edited by Carissa Erickson. The music is by David Hyde. Please look for a new episode of our podcast coming out soon. Remember, you have inherited a great legacy. You have an opportunity to create a great legacy. Engage your past to build a future.